Negotiations on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, continued this week in Atlanta as the U.S. hosted trade ministers Wednesday and Thursday. This country shipped about 44% of its exports to the 11 other TPP countries in 2013, and as we've stated before, the agreement could be very important to agriculture. Nebraska Extension Public Policy Specialist Brad Lubben joined us this week for an ag policy update, including discussions on country of origin labeling and ag appropriations. But we started by asking for an update on TPP.
We're still waiting for good signs of progress in the Trans-Pacific Partnership talks. We were at this stage earlier this year when we passed Trade Promotion Authority and gave the administration the leverage to try and finish negotiations. But we still have some very difficult hurdles to cross to get to a final agreement.
What are those final hurdles?
Well, clearly you have an ag sector in the United States that is looking for expanded access and opportunities in that TPP region, the Southeast Asian and Pacific Rim countries. But we also have a number of tariff and other border measures that restrict trade, and we have some domestic programs in other countries that are concerning. So amongst the hurdles is the continued restrictions on imports into Japan. But when we ask for relief from Japan, they ask for measures in other economic areas like automobiles and others that affect U.S. interests. But you also have dairy in Canada and other issues elsewhere that mean this is not easy to put to bed.
Is there a realistic time frame of when you think this could go?
Well, it seems as if we are up against the hurdle, and the question is, if you're willing to get across that hurdle, it can happen at any time. If the countries continue to sort of dance around that hurdle and keep forestalling the commitment, then this could be, unfortunately, could seem like an indefinite debate.
We talked months ago about cool issues between the U.S. and Mexico and Canada. Where are we in that process?
Right. Other trade issues, of course, remember cool, country of origin labeling. After many years of debate and several decisions at WTO, we know that the U.S. is in a position where they face a ruling that cool is out of compliance and has to be changed. The question is how bad or how much damage has occurred. Canada and Mexico filed under the arbitration clause to assess damages. The debate is, it's as far apart as a U.S. argument that the damages are less than $100 million and a Canada and Mexico argument that the damages are as much as $3 billion. So somewhere in there, the arbitration ruling would find what damages from cool have really been to those two countries. That doesn't mean that we suddenly start paying damages and leave cool alone, but it does mean that we get to the point where we actually sort of force something to happen. And that something seems to be increasingly likely, that you either repeal cool altogether or you look at some proposed legislation that tries to establish a voluntary labeling regime for cool as opposed to the mandatory one.
Let's focus on Washington, D.C. and now into October. That transition between September and October brought again another debate about whether the federal government would shut down on October 1st. Right. How does that debate relate to agriculture?
Well, it's unfortunate and challenging that we seem to keep having this debate year in and year out. The likelihood that we have a continuing resolution here to fund at least the beginning of fiscal 16, that'll keep the government offices open and programs running, but it doesn't really allow us to make changes. It doesn't allow us to bring about policy changes and new priorities. The other thing it doesn't really give us much hope for is any resolution in the budget and appropriations process anytime soon. We're only beginning the election cycle here. If you can't finish an appropriations bill in an off year, you're certainly not likely to finish it in an election year either. So we could be looking at 2 years or so of continuing resolutions because you can't come up with a full bill.
We know that producers are supposed to expect payments for ARC and PLC in October. Are those in danger at all?
Right. With the continuing resolution, we know programs are running. We know the offices will be there to calculate and distribute payments. We do also know that payments are subject to something called budget sequestration. This actually dates back to 2011, which was an earlier time when we needed to come to a grand agreement on budget and spending. And the argument was, if you can't come to the grand agreement, you'll automatically implement something called sequestration and take a percentage reduction in those accounts. We've been living with sequestration ever since. and we'll likely see a 7% or so reduction in farm program payments that are paid out here in October because of it.
Our coverage from Japan earlier this year contains more specific information on how the TPP could impact ag trade. You can find those reports under the MJ Extras tab on the Market Journal website.